Hello, I'm Gary Stearman, and this is Prophecy Watchers. Bible prophecy becoming much more exciting in these days in which we live, and we have a very, very special guest with us today, Dr. David Reagan. You're going to like what he has said in his latest book. It excites me in ways that are hard to describe. But Dave Reagan, welcome back, and we're going to try to explain what's in that book.
It's always good to be here. It's a blessing.
It's good to have you, and I have to say right up front, Dave's a terrific writer. You have a way of putting complicated ideas into simple, discernible
Well,
language.
that's a gift from God, but for example, when I wrote my commentary on the book of Revelation called Wrath and Glory, I gave the first copy in manuscript form. I gave it to my oldest daughter to read, and she read it in a day, and she called me, and I said, I just finished, and I said, fine, what did you think? She said, well, Dad, I don't want to hurt your feelings. I said, well, what do you mean? She said, I understood every bit of it. I said, you just gave me the highest compliment you could give me. She said, well, I thought you were writing for scholars. I said, I don't write for scholars. There are people who need to write for scholars, but I write for the person in the pew. And God has given me the gift of being able to take complex ideas and make them simple to understand.
Well, what can I say? Everybody loves a storyteller. And you've got that whatever it is inside of you, the art of telling the story. And this book that you've written called Wars of the End Times, and as you look at the cover, behind the title is the number 9. Yeah. Now, let's talk about that. Why the number 9?
Well, that's because that's how many wars I came up with for the end time, but you just enlightened me about that, so why don't you enlighten the viewers?
Before we came on, we were talking, and we were recalling E.W. Bullinger's book called Number in Scripture, written long, long ago. And he said the number 9 is always dealing with finality in the Bible. So I said, well, how does that figure into your book?
Well, because I'm talking about the finality of the Bible.
You really are. The wars of the end times. And you've got these wars enumerated. The first one you're calling the War of Annihilation, and you reference Psalm 83. Let's start there.
Okay. Well, let me just make one comment before we do that, and that is that the reason I wrote this book, Gary, and you're familiar with this, is because for 41 years when I was head of Lamb and Lion Ministries, before I retired in 2021, every time a war broke out in the Middle East, people would just inundate me with emails and phone calls. Is this the War of Armageddon? Is this the War of Armageddon? And it occurred to me after thinking that over that is really the only war that people seem to be aware of in the end times, is Armageddon. So I thought, well, I think I'll try to write a book that indicates that there may be other wars besides Armageddon. So that was the impetus for this book. And the first war that I mentioned in the book is one that you just introduced, and that's in Psalm 83, and it's called the War of Annihilation because that's what Psalm 83 says the people are trying to do that surround Israel. They're trying to annihilate Israel, and it names some nations in particular. Now this particular war, I point out in the book, is a very controversial one in terms of whether it is really going to happen or not going to happen. The person who focused on this war and brought it to modern day attention was Bill Solis, who you've had on this program many times. And he said, this is really going to be the first war of the end times, and it solves a mystery. The mystery is this, that the war everybody's always thought about is the first one, Gog and Magog. It describes all of the allies of Russia and does not mention a single nation that has a common border with Israel. And he said the reason it doesn't is because this war is a war with Israel and all the nations that have a common border. That's going to be the inside war, and Israel's going to conquer all those, and they'll probably call out to Russia to come to their help. And the Gog and Magog will be the next war that will come down, and they don't mention these because they're all under Israeli control. And when this came out, when Bill really focused the spotlight on this, the very first response, as I point out in the book, is that people said, well, the author of this psalm, Asaph, they said, Asaph was not a prophet. Asaph was the worship leader of David, and he wasn't a prophet. It couldn't be a prophecy. Well, that was put down very quickly because it was pointed out that 2 times in the Scriptures, Asaph is referred to as a prophet of God in 1 Chronicles 25 and 2 Chronicles 24. So then they came back after that and they said, well, he may have been a prophet, but this is not a piece of prophetic literature. What this is a lament. It's a lament. There's nothing in it that really is prophetic in nature, they say, because it's just a lament in which Asaph is lamenting the fact that Israel all the Jewish people are always under attack from somebody. Well, that was one of the responses. Another one was that was fulfilled somewhere in the Old Testament. They argued that it was already fulfilled. It did have to do with a war, and they mentioned several wars, but none of them fit the categories there. And then they went after it by saying it was a modern day fulfillment. That is fulfilled in modern day, and many very prominent Bible prophecy scholars took that position, and they argued that it was the War of 1967, the Six-Day War. And it could well be, because that Six-Day War, all of these people were involved either directly or indirectly behind the scenes. And well, Paul Benoit takes that position. I agree.
I think it certainly outlines the Six-Day War. Yeah. And what is Bible prophecy? And I've heard this, I don't know, for decades now. Dave, 2/3 of the Bible is prophecy. No, 6/10 of the Bible is Bible prophecy. Well, no, I don't think it's more than about 4/10 of the Bible is. And then when I say, may I please speak? Yes. I think all of the Bible is Bible prophecy. We just haven't learned how to interpret it.
There you go.
Because the Bible begins with, in the beginning.
Yes.
And then when you go over to the last page of the Bible, it says, and I saw new heavens and new earth. Right. And in between, what do you have? You have right. Bible prophecy.
What I do in that first chapter is I give you a survey of what Bible prophecy scholars say about this and their interpretations of it. And I found it fascinating myself to read all of these different positions that people have. And I came to the conclusion that there is no biblical fulfillment of Psalm 83, and the Six-Day War could be very much could be a fulfillment, or at least a pre-fulfillment, and that the complete fulfillment of Psalm 83 is likely in the future, and it might be the war that paves the war for Gog and Magog, but it's up in the air. I end the chapter by saying we really don't know whether this is going to be an end-time war or not. But the next one we know for sure, Gog and Magog.
But you have to look at it. Psalm 83 certainly has a message.
Yes.
And as you read it, invariably you'll say, wow, a lot of this is going on in Israel today. A lot of what Psalm 83 says. It's just that we don't have a deep enough appreciation of what's really going on behind the scenes.
One thing I would say about Psalm 83, it indicates very clearly that Israel is always going to be under attack, and God's going to preserve them. And we know from other scriptures in the end times that it says Israel in the end times will be like David against Goliath. It says that Israel will be protected by God, supernaturally protected. They have been through history. That's one of the greatest miracles of history, the preservation of the Jewish people. And Israel is going to be protected.
We're talking to Dr. David Reagan, and one of my favorite writers, by the way, as I told him about his books, they just pull you along. Some books are hard to read. His just have a flow to them, and he's a gifted writer. And we're going to be talking about wars of the end times when we come back. But first, let's take a little break and tell you about our magazine, The Prophecy Watcher. By the way, I've invited Dave to give us an article or two in the future because we would love to publish him in The Prophecy Watcher. Be right back.
In case you haven't noticed, the whole world is spinning out of control. But we are not surprised because many of the things taking place were prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago. That's why we want to offer you a very special subscription to our magazine, The Prophecy Watcher, that will keep you on the cutting edge of Bible prophecy. Stay informed on prophetic world events. Follow the nuclear threats from Russia and Iran, China's march to world domination, the likelihood of another global pandemic, the rise of artificial intelligence and transhumanism, war in the Middle East, the UFO phenomenon, and the latest technology preparing the world for the mark of the beast. With your gift of $50 or more to support the worldwide outreach of Prophecy Watchers, You will receive 12 issues of the magazine in either print or digital format. You will also receive 10 bonus DVDs that feature in-depth teaching on the ancient book of Enoch, heaven and the New Jerusalem, the biblical case for the rapture, a look at how God put the gospel in the stars, what really happened at the Tower of Babel, and Ezekiel's prophecy on the Battle of Gog and Magog. This special offer is available anywhere in the United States with free shipping included. Don't wait. Pick up the phone right now and call the toll-free number on your screen or visit us at prophecywatchers.tv. Stand with us today and help us take the message of Christ's soon return to the whole world.
And we're back once again talking to Dr. David Reagan. And may I call you Dave?
Yes, please.
All right. Wars of the End Times is the book. It's an interesting book, and you feature 9 wars in this book. And the second one you mentioned is the one that everybody's talking about.
No doubt this is a war going to occur. The question about this war that is debated hotly is, when is it going to occur? What will be the timing? And I go through in this chapter and show you all the different viewpoints that are held by major Bible prophecy scholars, and they are all over the place. I mean, there are some who take the position it's going to be before the rapture and before the tribulation. There are those who say it's going to be after the rapture but before the tribulation.
Yes.
Traditionally, dispensationalists have always taken the position it was going to be at the beginning of the tribulation, because it talks about that Israel is at peace when this war begins. And they said, well, the only peace Israel's going to have is the peace that the Antichrist gives them. So that was the traditional position. But that position has shifted. And the majority viewpoint that I found today is that it's going to be occurring after the rapture and before the tribulation begins. And I give you the names of all the prophecy scholars who take that position. But that doesn't mean that's the right position. There are others who say it's going to be mid-tribulation, the end of the tribulation, the end of the millennium. In fact, I was surprised. Well, I think the one that surprised me the most was what I call the 2 phases. And that is the idea that 38 and 39 are talking about 2 separate wars. They're not talking about the same war. C.I. Scofield argued that 38 would be fulfilled at the end of the tribulation in the Battle of Armageddon, and chapter 39 would be fulfilled at the end of the millennium. And that's also the position of Charles Ryrie and Harold Harner, and Andy Woods tends to take that position, that one of those is talking about the war at the end of the tribulation, and the other talking about the war at the end of the millennium. So there are attitudes all over the place.
And some people say it could happen day after tomorrow.
That's right. That's right.
And they are looking at Ukraine and Russia.
Yes.
And Gog is mentioned here. Son of man, set thy face against Gog. And so who's Gog? What's Gog? And you start looking in the Bible, and I know you've done this, but Gog is that northern region. It encompasses parts of Germany,
Yes.
Czechoslovakia, Ukraine, to be very current, all the way over to Moscow. Yeah. And that whole northern territory is Gog. And the Bible says that at some point Gog is going to come south toward Israel.
Well, one of the keys is it says that Israel is going to be living in peace without walls. And that's when the war will occur. Well, so there's lots of controversy there. Is Israel living really in peace? And others say, no, it says that Israel will be living in security. And Israel is secure because it has nuclear weapons and so forth. So it just goes on and on, the argument about these things. Israel today does not have cities that walls around it, but it does have a wall that goes all the way down the center of the country to protect them from the Palestinians. So I don't know. I'm not dogmatic about these things. I lay it out and say, here's what people think, and leave it to the reader to make their own decision.
You're not naming dates.
No.
Well, you know what? You get this question all the time, I'm sure. Do you have any idea about the date of the rapture? And how do you answer that question?
Maybe the next hour.
Could be the next hour. And by the way, it couldn't. Let me look at my watch.
I know is that we are. You know, I was having a dinner with a fellow a couple of years ago, and we were talking about the first coming of Jesus. And he said, "Boy, wouldn't it have been exciting to live in Bible times?" And I said, sir, we are living in Bible times.
We are.
We are the generation that's going to see the return of the Lord. All the signs have converged for the first time ever in history.
Indeed. Well put.
I'm listening. I'm not looking for signs anymore. I'm listening for a sound, the sound of a trumpet.
And that's going to be beautiful. Most beautiful trumpet you've ever heard. Chapter 3, the tribulation. And you have, as part of your title, conventional war.
Well,
could we be getting close to the tribulation?
Yes, very close. That's what the signs really point to. The signs point to the tribulation and the second coming of Jesus. And as Tim LaHaye used to say, he said, if the signs are pointing to that, we know the rapture's getting even closer. He said one time he was at a shopping mall and his wife said, what do you see that's different from the last time we were here? And he said, well, I see them putting up Christmas decorations everywhere. And it was in September. And she said, well, what does that mean? He said, it means Christmas coming. She says, it also means that Thanksgiving is right around the corner, even though these signs have nothing to do with Thanksgiving. And he used that to illustrate about the rapture. You see.
And what a beautiful illustration.
Yeah, beautiful illustration. So what I point out is that many people think the Antichrist is going to come to power because of his great wisdom and his personality and his diplomacy, and I think that will be how he'll come to power in Europe. But the rest of the world is not going to buy him. And I just, I taught international politics for 20 years. And I know a lot about it. You can't convince me that Africa, Asia, and Latin America are going to go running to the Antichrist and worship him after they spent 200 years trying to get out from underneath European colonialism.
Yes.
They don't submit themselves. They're going to rebel against that. And so he's going to have to conquer the world. Once he gets in his position in Europe, he's going to have to conquer the world in order to set up his, and I think one of the groups that will be most opposed to him will be the Muslims. I think God will probably work through the Antichrist to put judgment on the Muslims.
And they are well financed and funded right now. And so they will play a very large part.
Yeah. So,
by the way, I've got to interrupt, and I have to tell our audience, David Reagan has one of the best overall senses of historical events and the passing of history, and it always shows up in his writing in ways that are really amazing. Now, a lot of people are bored by history, but when you insert historical notes...
I love history.
I know you do. He loves history, and he will make you love history, too.
So I think really that the sealed judgments are the Antichrist war to begin to take over the world. And what happens as a result of that war is that 1/4 of humanity dies. Now, today we have, say, 7 billion people. If the rapture were to occur tomorrow, let's say 1 billion are taken out. Yeah. Then that leaves us 6. And 1/4 of 6 is 1.5 billion. And then it says later on that another 1.5 billion are going to die of those who are left. So 3 billion are going to be dead by the middle of the tribulation. There's going to be a place, I have preachers call me and say, do you think we're in the tribulation right now? I said, when we get in it, you're going to have to call anybody. You're going to know. And what I think is that when we get to the trumpet judgments, that this traditional war morphs into a nuclear war. And we have a unprecedented nuclear war.
And just as a side note, there are all sorts of demonic apparitions. There are demonic openly expressed demonic powers at work in that war.
Right, that's right. And so what I do in chapter 4, when I talk about the tribulation nuclear war, is I first of all try to impress upon people what kind of weapons we're talking about today. We have weapons that are just absolutely unbelievable.
We do.
Our greatest bomb, I think it's called I can't remember the name of it, but it's it is so powerful, it's unbelievable.
Call it the neutron bomb.
Oh, yeah.
And people whisper about things like that.
The B-83 has a yield of 1.2 megatons, making it 60 times more powerful than the bombs dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And we've got 650 of these in active service. 650. And the most powerful bomb ever made is the Tsar Bomba, manufactured by Russia. 50 megatons. That's 2,500 times more powerful than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima.
And as we speak, Russia is experiencing an internal collapse.
And they got 3,000 of these.
And they've got so many bombs that they can't count them all. Who's going to be in control of all that nuclear power?
Yeah.
So,
and people were clapping for this fellow who was leading the resistance. They were welcoming in their cities as a deliverer. This guy is a murderer, a killer, a person probably worse than Putin.
This Wagner group, as it's called, is
and then the thing that I found most chilling is that China was the first to develop what is called a missile that is unbelievable in its power, and a missile that is capable of control from the moment it's launched. It's called a hypersonic glide vehicle. And you know, when you send them up in the air like that, they come down fast. But this, from the moment it's launched, it's going at those kind of speeds, and they can control it as to where it goes. For the first time in history now, we are really vulnerable. Our nation is.
Yes.
I mean, we've always been protected by our oceans, by the range of a ballistic missile. We are now vulnerable. And somebody can press the button and we're going to have an explosion.
We're talking to Dave Reagan, and the Wars of the End Times is his book. Like all of his books, it's readable. The pages will pull you through. You'll be amazed. And in fact, let's just pause for a moment, and we're going to tell you how you can get your own copy.
Wars and rumors of wars. These words came straight from Jesus in Matthew 24. As we get closer and closer to World War III, we're very cognizant of the fact that this war and several other future wars were written about over 2,500 years ago in the pages of God's Word. Dave Reagan is one of the world's leading experts on Bible prophecy and how it relates to current events. He is gifted in understanding the land of Israel and the promises God made to the Jewish people. Surrounded by enemies who seek their destruction, the walls are closing in. Hamas, Hezbollah, Syria, Iran, and the Palestinians all want to drive God's chosen people into the Mediterranean. Enter Dave Reagan and his new book, The 9 Wars of the End Times. As you've heard today, Dave expounds on the controversial war in Psalm 83. Is it a regional war between Israel and the nations that surround Israel, or a war that took place in 1967? Then there's the Gog and Magog war in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Is this one war or 2 separate battles? What war is next on God's end time calendar? 9 Wars and the End Times is available for your gift of $25 or more to help Prophecy Watchers take the gospel message all over the world. Just call our toll-free number 24/7 or visit our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv. Fortunately, God has a plan for Israel's future and another plan for the church. That plan for his bride includes the rapture, the day God calls all believers home to spend eternity with him. Dave defends the pre-tribulational rapture in 2 incredible resources, a book, Living on Borrowed Time, and a DVD, Jesus is Returning Soon. These 2 resources, along with Dave's 9 Wars of the End Times book, are part of the Dave Reagan End Times collection. Both books and DVD are available for your gift of $60 or more, with shipping included anywhere in the USA. As a special thank you for supporting Prophecy Watchers, we will also include a free bonus DVD, a powerful live presentation from a recent Prophecy Watchers conference. We agree with Dave. Jesus is coming soon, but there are rough times ahead for Israel and the world. But we have hope through a personal relationship with Jesus. Thanks for watching, and thanks for supporting this vital end times ministry.
And we're back. And I hope you do avail yourself of Dave's book. Again, I can't say this too often. You have a gift as a writer.
Well, thank you.
And I'm very much aware of that, having written things over the years, and I'm always trying to make things as readable as possible, and I don't always succeed. But I got to say, you succeed.
Well, one of the things I try to do is I realize that very few people read anymore. And I try to keep books as short as possible so that they can read it quickly. And that requires you to condense a lot of information into a very small area.
Good. I like it. My old English professor in college would love that. And now we're at chapter 4. We have just a very few minutes or precious seconds left in the program. Chapter 5 is the war in the heavens, and chapter 6, the war on the Jewish people. Let's kind of lay that out.
Well, the war in the heavens occurs in the middle of the tribulation, and that's when Satan decides one last time to try to take the heavenly throne. And, he is a deceiver, but he is the greatest example of self-deception because he believes he can take that throne. And so Michael, the archangel, who appears to be the head of the armies of God, takes him on in the heavens. And this is a heavenly war, not one here on the earth. And as a result of this war, Satan is defeated and he is cut off from heaven. No longer can he go to heaven and accuse us before God. He is thrown down to earth, and it's interesting when it says he's thrown down to earth, it says he comes down in great wrath knowing that his time is short, which means he knows Bible prophecy.
Wow. Now, that brings up a point, and we've just got a couple of minutes, and I'd like to have you address this subject. We can talk about human desires, the anguish of humanity as one warring faction rises up against another. It's the history of the world. But what you're writing about now is the ultimate, if you will, culmination of all wars. Yes. And the hand of God is in every one of these. And we as Christians should never forget that. And Amen. I don't think you do forget it.
God is in control. Gary, every time I get really upset about what's going on in the world, I read Psalm 2, because it says that while all of the leaders of the nations of the world are in revolt against God, God sits in the heavens and laughs. Wow. Not because he doesn't care, but because he has the wisdom and the power to orchestrate all the evil of mankind to the triumph of Jesus Christ.
Well, we've only gone halfway through this, and we're going to have Dave back so he can talk about the other half of the book. But it's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
We have just a few seconds, and I would like for you to address our audience and just tell them what you think about what's happening today and how they should be addressing this world in which we live.
Yes, I think you need to keep focused on Jesus and the fact that he has made promises to us, promises that he is going to return to this earth. He is going to set up a kingdom from Jerusalem, and the earth is going to be flooded with peace, righteousness, and justice as the waters cover the sea. And those of us who are believers, who at that time will be in glorified bodies, will be scattered over this earth to help the Lord reign. And that is a great promise, and he means it, and it's going to happen soon. The signs of the times have converged, and we are right at the moment when he's going to come back.
Amen. I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, you keep watching. We are